I'm Dr. Liz Dexter-Mazza,
And I'm Dr. Jim Mazza.
and we are the developers of the DBT Skills in Schools, DBT Steps A Social Emotional Learning Curriculum. And today we're going to talk about the skills components of dialectical behavior therapy that are made up of 4 skill modules of mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness skills, aka people skills. So the DBT skills can be helpful for anyone, including children, adolescents, and adults, and they really help to reduce problem behaviors and can teach kids and adults coping skills for managing difficult emotions. And because of the coronavirus pandemic and this upcoming school year has lots of kids, not to mention their parents and teachers, feeling anxious, afraid, angry, uncertain of what's to come in the fall, we wanted to come together to give you 4 tips based on the DBT Steps A Social Emotional Learning Curriculum that families and educational professionals can use to support their kids during these challenging and uncertain times. So we're going to jump in. I'm going to throw up some slides for you so you can see what we are talking about from skills perspective.
All right, so one of the first skills I think that's important to keep in mind and that we want to talk about is what we call wise mind, right? And wise mind is one of the skills that's in the module of mindfulness. And we believe that mindfulness is the core of all the other skills. So without you being aware of what your body's telling you, aware about some of your thoughts and where your mind is, none of the other skills that we're going to talk about or that are in our curriculum are going to work. So the mindfulness piece becomes really important. So wise mind, the skill of wise mind, is actually the combination of 2 different sets of mind. One is reasonable mind, where things tend to be very logical, tend to be what you think, tend to be factual, versus the other side being emotion mind, where we now have decisions that are being made because we're really angry or really sad, are really frustrated, right? And so those are what we call emotion mind. When you put those 2 things together, as you see in the slide there, that middle part where you have a little bit of reasonable mind and you have a little bit of emotion mind is what we call wise mind, right? And in our wise mind, we know what I know to be, right? In emotion mind, we know what we feel, and in reasonable mind, we know what we think. The important part about wise mind is that we want to make our decisions from the wise mind, from our core values, from our long-term goals. And so we have what we call how skills in mindfulness as well. And so several of those how skills are important to help us get back into wise mind when we're either in emotion mind, all emotion, or in reasonable mind and we don't have enough emotion, all right? And one of those is to do one thing in the moment, right? Just focus on one thing that you're doing, not multitasking, just one thing in the moment, be participating in that one thing, and then focus on what you're just doing before you move on to the next task. The second thing is being non-judgmental. This gets hard, especially during times of like COVID and times of anxiety that's happening in the family, right? Is to not be judgmental and to be snappy at your partner, your kids, your boss, whatever that is, right? And so the idea here is to just take information in that your facts, that your senses can see that you have, right? That you can describe them in facts, right? Seems like my boss said this, right? Just a factual type of statement. So being non-judgmental. My kid did this. Were they trying to really get back at me, or did they just do this one behavior, right? So just describing things as facts, trying to be non-judgmental.
Instead of saying, my boss is a jerk, being able to say, my boss asked me to do something I didn't want to do,
right?
Or forced me to do something I didn't want to do. It takes a lot more words.
Right, or my child did this to spite me, right? My child did this to get revenge. My child did something I asked them not to do, right? And what happens is that when we are judgmental, it fuels some of our emotions, and we don't want to be in that emotion mind, because when we get too emotionally minded, when the bus is being driven by emotions, and the bus I mean by our decision making, we usually make the situation worse. And so we want to refrain from doing that, right? And the last one of the house skills to get back into wise mind is what we call being effective. Do what is important for you for the most, right? Don't do what's now. What is your most versus what is now, right? Do what's effective versus what is right. There are many times when I've done things that I thought, well, this is the way it's supposed to be because that's how it's always been, or this is what is problematic, and it's the rule of the principle. I want this to be done, and that's often been ineffective. So do what works, be effective, right? And I think is an important part. Do you want to have anything you want to
I
add
say,
to
like,
that?
it always helps to look at with being effective. Is this what I want in the short term, what I want right now, or is it what I want in the long term, what I want most? And being able to find yourself in wise mind and take that breath to ask yourself those things can help us to be more effective. The only other thing I would add to this is that I think it's really helpful when there's a common language between adults and kids and teenagers that we can use to help identify what somebody's experiencing. So
Yeah.
being able to say something, do you think you're an emotion mind right now? Or would that be an emotion-minded decision or a wise mind decision, right? Helps you to be able to identify that and have a conversation on how do we get ourselves back into wise mind collaboratively.
And I think that's great. And especially if you got little ones running around, right? Some young kids, they're going to be really surprised that you can actually have an emotion mind and a reasonable mind. And when you can combine them to get wise mind, the light kind of turns on for them, right? And so I think that's really important. Okay, so let's move on.
All right, our second skill for you is one of my all-time favorite skills of dialectical thinking, right? It's the idea, it's based on a philosophical perspective of how two things can be true at the same time and how we can get ourselves unstuck when we start getting into all or nothing or rigid thinking. And one of the things I love the most about this is I think that dialectical thinking can help us to start laying the foundation for being able to see multiple perspectives in a situation, and helps to start teaching us about validation for both ourselves and others. And one of the quick and easy ways I always want to make sure that I teach every parent and adult to use this skill is one part of it is replacing the word but with and. By simply changing those two words, we can have a different type of conversation between two people. I think of but as a giant eraser, right? That once you say the word but, everything that came before it gets erased, and we're just waiting for, the
Other shoe to drop, right?
For something, the criticism to come down. You're like, oh, I can tell you worked really hard on this test, and now we're waiting for the but. You
got a D.
You got a D, and the quality of work is still really poor, versus I can tell you worked really hard on this test and the quality is still poor or is still not as high as we want it to be. So being able to have that and just kind of opens us up as people to be able to hear the other side. That too, we work really hard and we have to work harder. The COVID-19 is really frustrating. Nobody likes it. Nobody wants it to be this way. And this is how things are for us right now. And we have to figure out how to be effective and thrive during this time.
Yeah, important also for partners, right? You're often, a lot of you might be home with your partners at this point, right? A lot. And so, yes, that's true. And they're you're stepping on each other's toes and spaces and so forth. And so using that and allows, yes, I need to work and you do too, versus I see that you're working, but I need to work too. It almost eliminates their working, right? Their value of themselves as that professional or as a parent, right? And so I think we want to try to use the and to honor both sides, as you said.
Right. And so if you try any of these skills today, I want you to pay attention mindfully throughout the rest of the day to any time you use the word but, and try to take a pause and replace it with the word and just notice how it might land differently in your conversations with other people.
Great. All right. This is you too.
Okay. So let's talk about another skill that kind of flows right in from what we were just talking about, our skill of accepting reality or radical acceptance, about really in our heart of hearts, just knowing that we're in a time of pandemic, but really radically accepting that we're in this time of pandemic, our current reality, and helps us to move away that things should be different. If people would just wear masks, or we could just go back to school, it would be normal. And getting away from those woulds and shoulds that kind of get us stuck and keep us suffering, I want us to think about how do we move to radical acceptance. And I call this our AAA model, where we talk about first you have to have awareness of what's going on around you. And then there's acceptance, radical acceptance of this is the way things are right now, right? We don't, for some of us, we still don't know if we're going to be going back to school in the fall or not, in person, fully at home, or some kind of hybrid model. Districts are changing and schools are changing week to week on what they're going to do.
Great. And so let me just jump in here for a second. That if we can do that first A of awareness, it also helps model for our kids that they have to be aware as well, right?
Mhm.
And that awareness I talked about right in the first set of skills in the mindfulness area, right? Being aware of what's around you, what your body's doing, and what your mind is thinking, right?
Mhm.
And so we need to help our kids also radically accept that this is different. And so if you refuse to do that, so will they. And that's just going to cause a lot more suffering and a lot more misery.
Mhm.
And the struggle is going to be, I think, worse to get through this time, right? And so I think the modeling piece of parents also being aware, telling our kids to wear masks, telling them that they have to be social distance, as well as you modeling that too, right?
Mhm.
Becomes really important. So there's the first A is awareness.
Right. And so then we get to acceptance, where we truly accept that the pandemic is still going on 20 weeks into it. We don't know what's happening in the fall. We don't know what's happening, in through December. Some schools aren't going back to school, or work's not going back to work until January in some places. So we just don't know. So we have to accept that we don't know. And then once we can have that level of radical deep acceptance, and we might have some grief or sadness that comes up with that, some anger that comes with that, but once we've accepted it, we can move into effective action and problem solving,
Right.
and figuring out, okay, if right now we don't know if our kids are going back and we keep going through this in school, so we're going to plan for them to be home full time, or we're going to plan, right, so that if they end up going back at some hybrid way, then we know what that looks like. Or we have to plan for them to go back in some hybrid model, so we're going to plan for that a little bit as well.
Right.
We're not going to get too deep into it that it overwhelms us. We're going to make plans, radically accepting that we've got about 5 weeks until we know what happens.
And so important in the acceptance phase, that acceptance doesn't mean approval, right? That we don't approve of the COVID virus. We don't approve of a bunch of things, and it still is the reality. And if we keep pushing it back, it shouldn't be this way. This is terrible and everything else. We end up making choices that aren't actually in reality, right?
Right.
It just causes more problems and more issues for us. And so that acceptance piece becomes really important. And especially when sometimes behaviors occur because they haven't accepted the reality of how things are, right? And so somebody's saying, I'm accepting this, I'm going to run out and go to a party or go into a restaurant without my mask on. That's going to be more problematic, right? And so the triple A model for our radical acceptance is important, especially during this time.
Remember, awareness, acceptance, and action. So think about today as well. Is there something that you are struggling to radically accept right now? And how would things be different for you if you did? Would that allow you to potentially move into problem solving or action? Right. Or even action could be just like sitting with whatever emotion comes up with that acceptance, and or moving into problem solving. What would that look like for you?
Right. And that radical acceptance could be in your household, it could be in your community, and it could be in the entire country, right? So there's multiple places where you're going to have to practice that,
absolutely,
especially during this time.
All right, let's tell them our next skill.
All right, next one is going to be what we call our please skills. And you can see from the slide that we've colored these letters here to help us with what we call our emotion regulation skills, right? There's a way for us to decrease our vulnerability to getting our emotions driving the bus. And so the idea here is that we can do routines and treat ourselves well, and to practice things that kind of fuel us to be more kind of emotionally stable, right? Emotionally reliable in that way, right?
Yeah.
And so these skills are things that people may sometimes do already. Just want to tell you that we want you to keep doing them to help you just stay more steady, I guess is the word I want, for your emotional state at this point, right? So
I think of these sometimes these are common sense things, like the simplest skills that most of us know we should do every day, and the hardest ones to get yourself to do consistently every day.
Love that you put in and instead of but, right? Easy, not but, it's an and, because they both are true, right? They're easy, and how often do we do them? All right, so PLEASE is an acronym. So the P in PLEASE is for physical health. We don't do well interacting with our spouses, partners, grandparents, kids when we're not feeling very well. And so our emotions tend to be much higher, right? We're more vulnerable to them when we're physically not feeling well, right? The L is for limited screen time. And we watch this happen in our household with our kiddos all the time, when immediately asking them to come off a screen, or if they've just come off a screen, they're much more emotionally sensitive, right? And so just trying to put limits on that screen time. We know that in a virtual world, we're going to have to use screens to do some of our online education pieces, limiting the time after that, right? And so that we want to make sure that we're not overdoing it and using screens as a babysitting tool, all right, or a childcare tool, all right?
And if you're familiar with some of the DBT skills already, you'll notice that we made a few adaptations here to some of the letters in the mnemonic as we work with schools and parents.
Right, and the L being one of them for a limited screen time. The E, the first E is eat a balanced diet. Now we all know this to be true. We've been learning this since kindergarten. How often do we really do it though? How often do we have all of our fruits and vegetables? Do we have our cups of milk and so forth? And so that becomes important. When we eat a balanced diet, we usually feel better about ourselves. If we feel better about ourselves, we usually have more emotional well-being, right? All right, the A is to avoid overindulgence, all right? Now, in the DBT world, that was avoid mood-altering drugs, right? And so we've kind of said, hey, I don't think you have to avoid everything. The idea is not to use it too much, not to have it as a crutch and not to become dependent on it. And so we want to have avoid the overindulgence of alcohol or drugs in that, right? The S is sleep, and so getting enough sleep. So 8 hours of sleep would be great. How often do we all get 8 hours of sleep?
And also not oversleeping. For some of our teenagers, sometimes getting 12, 13, or 14 hours sleep is too much sleep, and that makes us more sensitive as well to our emotions.
Correct, right? And then the last E is exercise, right? And so getting some of our daily exercise, getting out and moving your body, or staying inside because it might be raining or it could be snowing, whatever else it is, just doing some exercise routine to get your body and heart flow moving, right? Or blood moving, I should say. And so go ahead and gear up that heart a little bit, get that moving a bit, get the blood flowing. And those 6 things help us kind of maintain some of our emotional stability in the DBT Steps A.
Right, I think of them as daily deposits. What are you doing as daily deposits to take care of yourself, to help you on those days when there's emotional withdrawals, when your emotions are big and they're going out? Do we have enough deposits to help keep us balanced in there?
Right.
All right. We're so happy that you stayed here with us and you came to listen to some skills that we wanted to share with you all. If you want to hear more from us, please feel free to check out our website at www.dbtinschools.com. But also, Jim and I hang out 3 mornings a week on Facebook and Instagram live stream for our Parenting Through COVID-19 and Beyond at 7 a.m. Pacific time, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning. So we hope you'll see us there, or maybe we'll talk to you at a training sometime as you maybe think about bringing DBT Steps A into your school. Take care and thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.